Have you ever really tried to, you know, find yourself, like really pinpoint it within your own thoughts and experiences?
It sounds almost ridiculously simple at first.
Right. Well, I'm right here. But for psychologists, especially back when the scientific study of the mind was just getting going, this wasn't simple at all.
No, it became this really profound and actually surprisingly contentious puzzle. Could you genuinely put the self under a scientific microscope?
To this deeply personal, continuous, you be pinned down, measured, understood scientifically, or was it just too slippery for the lab?
That's the core scientific challenge they face.
And that's exactly our mission today on the Deep Dive. We're going to unpack this long-standing debate and see what it still tells us. And our main guide for this is a really pivotal paper. It's called The Self in Scientific Psychology.
Ah, yeah, a classic.
It was published way back in 1915 by the pioneering psychologist Mary Whiton Calkins. Came out in the American Journal of Psychology.
And Calkins, she just frames the challenge perfectly with this fantastic analogy.
Oh, the fox one.
Yeah, the fox one. She asks, basically, is there no fox at all, or does he just keep avoiding the traps we set for him?
Love that.
Yeah.
So is the self just an illusion, something we imagine, or are scientific methods just not, clever enough to actually catch it?
Precisely. That's the dilemma.
So what can you expect from this deep dive? Well, first, we'll explore how Calkins and others back then even understood this self. What did they think it was?
Then we'll get into the methods, the scientific tools they were using or trying to use to study it.
Right. And finally, the really interesting part, we'll look at some surprising findings from what they called experimental introspection, times when it really seemed like they did catch glimpses of this elusive fox.
Against the odds, really.
Okay, so let's start with Calkins' view. What exactly was this self she was talking about? How did she conceptualize it?
Well, fundamentally, Calkins argues the self is indefinable.
Indefinable?
Yeah, she uses the term sui generis.
Which means?
Of its own kind. Basically, it's so unique you can't define it by comparing it to anything else or breaking it down into simpler parts.
Okay.
Like, one person she quotes compared it to describing color to someone who's colorblind. You can only point to it. You can't logically derive it from other concepts.
That actually makes a lot of sense intuitively. Like, how would you define I?
Exactly.
So if it's indefinable, how did they even approach it scientifically? How could they talk about it? Did it have characteristics?
Yes, absolutely. While Calkins says it's indefinable, she's very clear it's not indescribable. She highlights 4 key properties, not definitions, she stresses, but consistent characteristics of the self as we experience it. These are the things about you that are always there.
Properties, not definitions.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So what's the first one?
First, there's persistence or self-identity.
Persistence.
Yeah. The idea that you are the same I who is perceiving different things across time, even if the perceptions are years apart or totally different. It's that continuous thread.
Right. The feeling that the me now is connected to the me from yesterday or 10 years ago.
Precisely. Like one psychologist she cites, Knight Dunlap, put it, the important thing isn't just the different perceptions, but that they're perceived by the same I. The identity is just the identity of the I.
Okay, that core feeling of continuity. Makes sense.
Okay.
What's next?
Second property, individuality or uniqueness.
Okay.
Yourself is distinct from every other self. Any thought, any feeling, what she calls a psychic fact, belongs to an individual. It's either mine or somebody else's. It's fundamentally subjective and unique to you.
Right. My toothache is mine, not yours. Thanks for that.
Exactly. So you're persistent and you're unique. The third property, the self is fundamental or basal to experiences. It's the I that does the experiencing.
The foundation?
Kind of, yeah. Dunlap getting. We cannot talk of experiencing without an I which experiences. Your thoughts, emotions, they don't just float around, they exist within you. They're part of you. One researcher, called the self the essential foundation of experience.
Okay, so it's not just experiencing things, it's the experiencer.
Yes. And the fourth property, Calkins points out, is relatedness to environment.
Relatedness.
The self isn't isolated. It's always interacting with its world, the social world, the physical world. You're a self in relation to other people, to objects, to situations.
Like James Ward said, psychology looks at the living subject in intercourse with his special environment.
Exactly that. You're defined partly by your context.
Okay, so these 4 properties, persistence, uniqueness, being fundamental, and relatedness, they really paint a picture of what Calkins and others meant by self. It's not just some abstract idea.
No, it's how we intuitively understand our own continuous existence, our unique viewpoint, right?
Yeah. But here's the big question, the one Calkins grappled with. Can something so personal, so maybe even indefinable, be studied scientifically? This brings us to the methods, doesn't it?
It really does. This is where the traps for the fox come in. Psychology, like other sciences, uses observation and experiment.
Observation is just looking, right? Experiment is more active.
Right. Experiment involves observation, but adds manipulation. Artificially changing conditions, repeating things, isolating variables, varying them, trying to find causal links, standard scientific stuff.
But applying that to the self, that's where it gets tricky. Calkins points out some major hurdles.
Huge hurdles. First, she notes that psychic facts are fluid.
Meaning
Thoughts, feelings, moments of awareness. They aren't like chemicals in a test tube. You can't perfectly repeat them on command, vary them precisely, or measure them accurately like physical phenomena. They flow and change.
Try having the exact same feeling twice. It's impossible.
Pretty much. And then there's the even bigger problem, what Calkins called the ubiquity problem.
Ubiquity, meaning it's everywhere.
Exactly. It's omnipresent. Think about how a basic experiment works. To study X, you need conditions with X and conditions without X, right? Control group.
Sure, to see the effect of X.
But Calkins asks, what if whenever I'm conscious, I am conscious of self? If the self, our X, is always present in consciousness,
then you can never have the without X condition.
Bingo. You can never exclude the self to create a true control condition for studying the self itself. It's always part of the observation.
It's like trying to study seeing without using your eyes.
A good analogy. This ubiquity, Calkins argued, disqualifies the self as an object of experiment in the strictest sense. You just can't isolate it properly.
Okay, so strict experimentation on the self itself is maybe out. What about introspection? Just looking inward.
But Calkins is careful here. Scientific introspection isn't just casual navel-gazing or, thinking about your day.
Right, it's not just daydreaming.
No, it's supposed to be rigorous.
Yeah.
Detailed analytical observation of your own psychic experiences. Like a scientist inspecting a specimen, but turning that detailed gaze inward. It requires, as she put it, an even frame of mind, an accurate, careful recording. The goal is understanding consciousness itself.
Okay, a more disciplined form of self-observation.
Yeah.
So, did this method offer a way to potentially catch the elusive self?
Calkins thought so, particularly what was called systematic or controlled introspection. This often involved introspecting under specific, experimentally controlled conditions, like while performing a task.
Controlling the external situation to standardize the internal observation, kind of.
Exactly. And here's where things get fascinating. Because some psychologists using this method did seem to find evidence of the self.
They caught the fox.
It seems like it, sometimes even by accident. Calkins mentions a study by E. Durr, for instance. His subjects were introspecting on acts of will, and some reported feeling concerned in it with our whole personality, or having a vivid, continuous consciousness of self.
Wow, so it just emerged from the reports, even if that wasn't the main focus.
Yeah, the fox was peeking out even when the traps weren't specifically set for it.
Incredible. What about studies that were maybe a bit more targeted, or where the findings really highlighted the self?
Okay, a great example Calkins discusses is Katsarov's study on recognition.
Recognition, like recognizing a face or an object.
In this case, geometric drawings. Katsarov showed subjects these drawings, asked if they were familiar or unfamiliar, and then crucially had them introspect on the experience of recognizing or not recognizing it.
So not just yes, no, familiar, but what did that feel like?
Exactly. And while he looked at objective stuff like speed and accuracy, the real gold was in the subjective reports. He found the key element in recognition wasn't just memory, but a specific feeling of familiarity.
Okay, that feeling we all know.
Right. But here's the kicker. Katsarov concluded that this feeling arises from the fact that this very sensation has connected itself with the very feeling of ourself and has been enveloped by this feeling of self.
Whoa. Enveloped by this feeling of self. That's pretty direct evidence, isn't it? The self is actively involved in just recognizing something.
It really is. The sensation becomes part of you, integrated into your sense of self. It's not just data processing, it's personal.
Okay, so recognition involves the self.
Mm-hmm.
What about more active mental processes, like making a choice?
For that, Calkins points to a study by Michaud and Prum on voluntary choice.
What'd they do?
They had people choose between simple arithmetic operations, like decide whether to add or multiply two numbers. But they had to choose for serious considerations, meaning it wasn't just random, they had to actually decide. Then detailed introspection on the process of choosing.
Okay, making a deliberate mental choice. What did the introspection show?
They found that the core of the final moment of choice, the decision itself, was this unique experience they called a consciousness of activity.
Consciousness of activity, like feeling your brain work.
Not quite like muscular effort or even thinking specific words. It was something more fundamental, an experience that, as they put it, lead directly to the affirmation of the intervention of the self.
The intervention of the self.
Yeah. People reported things like, it was I who acted, or I say it. That direct sense of personal agency, of me doing the choosing.
That I did that feeling again. So powerful.
It is. And interestingly, while the immediate experience was this consciousness of activity, later reflection often brought out the causal aspect of the self more strongly. Raises interesting questions about immediate experience versus how we interpret it later, doesn't it?
Definitely. And there was more work on volition, on will, right? Acts studies?
Yes, Narcisser's Acts work was really important here. Calkins highlights his second study of volition.
What was the setup there? Sounds complicated.
It was clever. Subjects first memorized pairs of nonsense syllables, building up a strong automatic association. Think A goes with B.
Okay, like a habit.
Exactly. Then the task was to override that habit with a willed intention. For example, see syllable A, but instead of saying B, say a word that rhymes with A.
So you have to actively fight the automatic response. That takes willpower.
Definitely. ACT was actually trying to measure the strength of the will against the strength of the habit.
And what did the introspections reveal about the self in that moment of effort?
They consistently revealed what ACT called a self aspect, the Ich-Seite in German, as being particularly prominent, really central to the act of willing.
The I side.
Kinda, yeah. Subjects reported these intense moments like, I will this time really pronounce a rhyme, or I will form a rhyme. That active, determined I was the starting point, the driver for achieving the goal against the ingrained habit.
So the I wasn't just present, it was driving the action.
Very much so, and Ach was firm on this. The self is experienced not just inferred or assumed. He even connected the feeling of success, the consciousness of achievement, I can do this, directly to our belief in free will.
Wow. So the experience of self in action is linked to our fundamental sense of agency.
That's what his findings suggested. It's a profound link observed right there in the lab exercises.
It really seems like the fox, this elusive self, was definitely showing up in these studies, even if it was hard to pin down perfectly.
Yeah, the evidence was accumulating, coming from different kinds of tasks, recognition, choice, volition.
So if these early psychologists were finding it, or at least finding strong traces of it, why the big debate? Why did so many others seem to deny it or ignore it?
That's the puzzle Calkins tries to solve in the later part of her paper. It's a great question. She argues, quite forcefully, that even the psychologists who claim to be selfless,
meaning they didn't believe the self was a valid scientific concept.
Right. Even they were constantly implying the self in their own writing. They couldn't help it. They'd use phrases like, I perceive, or talk about experience belonging to a single subject. The self was lurking in their language even as they denied it conceptually.
Interesting point. So she diagnosed why they were missing it, or choosing to ignore it.
Yes. She lays out 4 main reasons. And these are fascinating because they're really insights into scientific practice, maybe even scientific bias itself.
Okay, what's the first reason they missed the self?
First, back to ubiquity. Because the self is always there, it's easy to become inattentive to it.
Like the fish not noticing the water.
Exactly like that. Or Calkins' example. You don't constantly notice the feeling of your clothes unless your attention is drawn to it. The self, being the constant background of all experience, often just went unremarked upon in introspective reports.
Okay, makes sense. Too familiar to notice. What's the second reason?
Second, the focus on impersonal objects. A lot of systematic introspection work focused on things like perceiving colors, judging weights, or analyzing thought processes about external problems or logical relations.
So looking outward or at abstract relations, not inward at the experiencer.
Right. The focus was on the object of perception or thought, not the subject doing the perceiving or thinking. So the self naturally went unemphasized.
Yeah.
You focus on the task, not on the I doing the task.
Okay. And the third reason for omission?
The specific directions given to subjects. This is crucial. The instructions for introspection rarely, if ever, actually asked subjects to look for or report on the self.
Really? They didn't say, and tell us about your sense of self during this task?
Nope. They were told to report sensations, images, feelings, their qualities, intensities, very specific, often element-focused things. They weren't asked to note the receptiveness and activity of the self or their awareness of sharing others' experience.
So if you don't ask the question,
you're unlikely to get an answer about it. The traps simply weren't designed to catch that specific aspect of experience.
this seems like a huge methodological blind spot.
It was, and it leads directly to her fourth and perhaps most significant reason.
Which is?
The preconceptions about introspection itself held by some researchers and labs.
Their definition of what counted as good introspection.
Exactly. Some influential labs defined introspection very narrowly. They demanded reports only on what they considered basic structural elements like sensations or images or basic psychic functions, if the self didn't fit neatly into those predefined boxes.
It was excluded by definition.
Precisely. It wasn't considered a proper element or function. Or still, actually describing the self using everyday language like, I felt myself getting angry or I decided to, was often dismissed.
Dismissed how?
As mere untechnical narration, not proper scientific description. Even though, as Calkins points out, our everyday language is absolutely saturated with the I.
So the scientific framework itself, in some cases, actively excluded the very thing they were potentially looking for.
That's what Calkins argued. It's like insisting you can only describe a house by listing its bricks and mortar and dismissing any mention of the house itself as unscientific.
What a powerful critique of scientific method, especially back in 1915. She was really ahead of her time.
Absolutely. She challenged the idea that science had to deal only with objects radically different from everyday experience. Science, she insisted, should analyze and explain the things we actually encounter, lightning, plants, emotions, and yes, even our own selves, not dismiss them because they're complex or don't fit into neat little boxes.
So this whole deep dive really shows that the self, even over a century ago, wasn't just some vague philosophical idea for psychologists like Calkins.
Not at all. It was something being actively sought and often found, however imperfectly, within the demanding conditions of experimental introspection.
The fox was there, maybe not always easy to see, maybe hiding because of how the search was conducted, but present.
Definitely present in the data if you knew how to look, or perhaps if you didn't actively ignore it based on preconceived notions.
And the tension she identified back then, this gap between our undeniable intuitive experience of having a self and the real difficulty of capturing that self with certain scientific methods.
That tension is still absolutely with us today, isn't it? In neuroscience, trying to find the self in the brain. In AI, trying to understand consciousness. The same fundamental questions linger.
It really makes you think. If psychologists like Mary Whiton Calkins, working over 100 years ago with the tools they had, were already demonstrating that yourself isn't just an abstract concept, but an experienced reality, woven into the fabric of your knowing, your choosing, your feeling, what does that mean for how you understand your own consciousness right now?
And perhaps, what new kinds of traps, what new methods or perspectives do we need today to get an even better glimpse of this most intimate, yet still somewhat elusive aspect of being human?